Thank you for listening to my story. My name is Sarai and my husband's name is Abram. I got married same time as my sister-in-law, Milka. Her husband's name was Nahor. Abraham and Nahor had a brother, Haran, who died and left behind his son Lot. I was barren, no child. My father-in-law, Terah, decided to take my family and his grandson Lot to Canaan from Ur. When we got to Haran, we settled there, and my father-in-law passed on. Lot then became part of our family. We embarked on the journey to Canaan, mainly because my husband Abram heard from God and was given a promise that he will be made into a great nation. And yes, I was still barren. We passed through the land of Canaan, camped a bit in Bethel, and continued towards Negev. During this expedition, there was a severe famine in the land, and we went to Egypt to live there temporarily. My husband then decided that I should pose as his sister and not his wife. His reasoning was the Egyptians would see how beautiful I was, then kill him to have me. He only imagined that they would kill him and nothing would happen to me. I decided to protect him. He was a good man who feared God. The moment we entered Egypt, the stares were unimaginable. People gazed at my beauty like never before. My husband was right. Word traveled so fast about my appearance that the princes of Pharaoh had to see for themselves. This is how I ended up in Pharaoh's palace. The princess praised my beauty to Pharaoh. My husband was not killed, but I was taken. This was not part of the plan. Pharaoh treated my husband very well. He gifted him with livestock and servants. This seemed like a bright prize for me. In an instant, this plan that I agreed to turned me into Pharaoh's wife. Who could protect me? I really pray that God protects me. Yes, God came through for me. He afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues. God fought my battle, one that only He could protect and fight for my husband and I. The plagues were very severe that Pharaoh summoned my husband and expressed his disappointment at how Abram had said I was his sister, yes, yet I was his wife. He then sent us away from his kingdom. Thank you, God. You saved my family. My husband was a very wealthy man. We had everything anyone could ever need in this life. We had a lot of livestock, silver and gold, and a lot of servants, but no child. My husband told me of his encounters with God. He told me that God promised he would have many descendants. He assured him that we were blessed and no one could curse us. I witnessed how God used my husband to go to war and rescue my nephew Lot and all the people who had been taken captive from their land. You see, Lot moved because he also got so blessed, and it was becoming difficult to keep all our wealth and servants in the same space. My husband graciously allowed him to choose the part of the land he preferred and we took the opposite one. I ached inside for a child. I ached and longed for a child. I knew my husband felt the same way, but God had made me barren. I could not have children. I had such a deep longing for a child, and even though I was getting older, the desire did not age. It grew. I decided to act. I had a female Egyptian servant. Yes, this was my only hope of getting a child. My faith in God's promises had really been tested. I had hoped and waited in God. I was not getting any younger. Where is God? Yes, my female servant would help me meet this need, the need for a child. This child could then become my adopted child and inherit all our wealth. Truth be told, my husband heard from God that his own son would inherit his wealth, but 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 I was not getting pregnant. I requested my husband to sleep with my servant so I could have a child by her. He had seen my anguish and he agreed to my request. I wish I had not made such a decision. I wish I had waited. Too late. My servant girl conceived. I should have been happy. This was my plan. It sounded perfect when I thought it through. My reward was contempt from my own servant, on top of the anguish of not having a baby that ate me deep inside. My plan failed. I was disrespected by my servant girl. I felt angry at my husband. My husband was a godly man. Seeing the anguish that had increased in me, he told me to do whatever I wanted with a servant who was now expectant. I unleashed all my anger and bitterness on her. I was so harsh that she fled. What was happening to me? Oh God, please help me. My servant returned and was a humble servant, but I had to watch her enjoying what I could not have, a baby. She got her baby, she raised her baby. I watched the baby grow, and even though God had promised us a son, I gave up on all that. I was now old. I was past the age of conception. That chapter was over for me. I made peace with my barren state and decided in my heart that Ishmael, the boy born to the servant Hagar, would be our heir. How I wish. But realistically speaking, it was impossible. I had that thought. One day, my husband came home with some very exciting news. I could see his face was radiant. God had spoken to him and had given us new names. My husband was no longer Abram, but Abraham. I was no longer Sarai, but Sarah. I liked that. It sounded a beautiful name. I liked it. Sarah and Abraham. I loved it. It was the rest of the news that awakened a desire in me that I knew had not died, even though I tried so hard. A baby. That God would make me have a baby. My husband was 99 years by now and definitely past the age of siring children. As he spoke about how he told God Ishmael was our heir and how God insisted that one from my womb would be the heir, my heart, my heart. This was my heart's desire. God help me to trust you. This is not easy. One day at midday, my husband sat at the door in the hot sun and saw some three men. He was a caring man, and considering the heat of the day, He insisted they take shelter and cool off in our home. I started on the bread immediately. My husband requested we entertain the guests. I had my favorite spot near the tent door, where I would enjoy listening to my husband's conversations and chat him from there whenever I was indulging in some work in the tent. These guests were very different. They asked of my whereabouts and then said I would have a child in a year's time. This was unexpected and I laughed quietly, giggling softly at the idea of being intimate with my husband. Honestly, I was worn out and my husband was old. Quite interesting guests, these ones were. I was sure I was very, very quiet until I had one of the lords asking my husband why I was laughing and doubting that I would bear a child. I was afraid and immediately denied laughing. The Lord insisted that I laughed. In fact, the Lord speaking to me assured me that He would be back in a year's time and that I would be a mother. I thank you, God, because in my doubt, you did not hold back your promise of a son to us. Thank you for your mercy and grace. Later, we moved our tent in Gerar, a place between Kadesh and Shur. I thought I was aged, but the people of Gerar saw me as a very beautiful woman. The cycle repeated itself. Again, my husband claimed I was his sister, and the king of Gerar, Abimelech, took me to be his wife. Oh God, please save me from this mess. I have been dragged in again. God protected me. I sacrificed myself to protect my husband, and God had deep mercy on me. God, the God we served, appeared in the king's dreams, and the king was terrified by all God said. He was so terrified and all those around him that he rose up very early and called for my husband. He was terrified and upset that my husband put them in a situation that would have caused God to kill them all. My husband confessed that he feared for his life because he knew the people of Gerar did not worship God. And so he said a part truth that Sarah, I, was his sister. This man Abimelech was very gracious to my husband. He allowed us to live where we wanted to, in his land. He proceeded to gift my husband with 1,000 pieces of silver to show that I was innocent. God had also done something very powerful. Because I was taken by the king as his wife, even though he did not touch me, all the women's wombs were closed by God. My husband prayed for them, and God in his mercy healed them, and the women, including slaves, started bearing children again. Later on, God did visit me. Oh my, I did conceive a miracle. And just as God had promised, I got a baby boy and we named him Isaac. God indeed put laughter in my mouth from the depth of my heart. God did put laughter in my mouth. We were so overjoyed with the blessing of a child, so much that we had a great feast when Isaac, our son, was weaned. In that celebratory mood, I saw the son of Hagar laughing at my baby. I had had enough. I demanded that the mother and the boy be cast out of our home at once. My husband was not too happy. This was also his son, but I had had enough. They had to go. Did I mention that God asked my husband to sacrifice my only son? Well, I learned about this as a testimony. God was refining my husband's faith in him and later provided a ram for the sacrifice. Oh, God met my need and blessed me with a child. I made many mistakes and acted in ways that did not honor God. But God was gracious to me and forgave me. He satisfied my heart's desire. Even though it took so long, God did come through for me at the right time. My name is Sarah. God granted me 127 years on earth. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Sarah. She happens to be the second woman we are talking about. And I hope you were able to listen to the story of Eve and guess which other woman is going to come on stage. Yes, keep guessing and let's see how God sees us through His lens as women. God bless you so much and have a lovely, lovely, lovely time.